I was talking to my son just a few days ago. It happens. Still, for now. And we were wrestling with a problem, and it had to do with Ted Lasso. I don't know if anybody knows about Ted Lasso. It's a TV show that is on Apple TV, if I remember correctly. It's a fabulous series, and we've enjoyed it, watching it. But we're having this argument about Ted Lasso himself, the head character in that series. He is from the South. He's got the accent to prove it. And in the series, he used to be a high school, if I remember correctly, a high school football coach. And out of the blue, he's hired by one of the team of the English Soccer Premier League to coach their team. They actually call it football there. And they wonder why we're calling a game that we play mostly with our hands football here. But that's a whole episode that you will have to watch at some point. His being hired comes from the fact that as a football coach, he's been extremely successful because he has a certain technique to coach his teams. And his technique is anchored based on incredible respect and compassion. He's someone who coaches his team with a big heart. He invites them to become the best they can be. There's never any punishment or any yelling or any putting you in your place. When players make mistakes, he sits with them and encourages them and pushes them to do better the next time. And he's got this incredible charisma and love for his players that they're just moved to follow him, to follow his guidance and his coaching. And obviously, I'm not going to tell you what happened in the series, but let's say that he was the right person for the job. I think that's all I'm going to say. In the eventuality that you meet him at some point on your TV. My son and I were having an argument because at some point in, I think it's the first season, he's confronted, Ted Lasso, he's confronted by one of the people who work in the football club in a way that is very aggressive, very arrogant, very verbally violent. And Ted Lasso stays his own Ted Lasso way and welcomes the anger, welcomes the outrage directed at him, and doesn't quite react. Just because that's who he is, that's his character. And my son was struggling with that because he felt that there are times where it is appropriate, compassionate as you might be, to rebuke someone when they come across in that kind of way, to actually take a stand and tell them that the way they are giving feedback, in this case, or accusing, isn't cool. Like, you shouldn't do that. But Ted Lasso doesn't, because Ted Lasso is this character. And my son and I were talking about when is it appropriate to actually be more forceful, right? Standing your ground when you need to give feedback to someone instead of just taking it in and acknowledging and being more like hoping that in time that person will see their difficult ways and change, because that's his stance. And so we had a really beautiful conversation around how do you give feedback, how do you give even criticism, and it's absolutely and completely, obviously, connected to this week's Torah portion. Because in this week's Torah portion, it's the opening Torah portion of the book of Deuteronomy. And the book of Deuteronomy is the book that recaps all that has happened in the 3 books that preceded it, from the Exodus till the moment where Moses and the Israelites are finding themselves, which is at the border of the Promised Land, ready to move in. But Moses has been told by God that he will never enter into the Promised Land, and so Moses takes the whole book of Deuteronomy, which takes a long time, because he knows that God said, after that, you're going to die, so he really milks it. He really tells the whole story over again in its most intimate details, making sure that he doesn't miss like a corner that the Israelites turn or whatever. He takes his time. He takes a whole book. But as you open the book, the first thing that happens in the book of Deuteronomy is Moses standing in front of the Israelites and listing all the ways over the last 40 years where they have missed the mark. All the ways, actually not all the ways, but every place where they have either angered Moses or betrayed God. And he names this place, this happened, and that place, that happened, all along, over 40 years. And if you are somewhat familiar with the Torah, you know that it's a long list. It's a long list. Every other turn of the scroll, they rebel against Moses, against Aaron, whomever is there, right? So it's a long list. And Rashi, the other French rabbi, 1,000 years ago, looks at this list of all the places that the Israelites have sinned along the way, and he writes very, in just a few words, this is rebuke or reproof. I don't know what the translation is in this case. Those are words of reproof. So if Rashi says that, it means you have to pay attention. How is Moses giving feedback in this case? How is he giving feedback, critical feedback, to the assembled people, and why? Why is he doing that? And if you actually read carefully through the list, most of the time when you have the list in Torah, you just, go quickly and then move on to, what's important. Rashi says, no, this is important. You have to pay attention because Moses is demonstrating how to actually give feedback. And the way he does it is that, as I said earlier, he doesn't specifically name what they've done wrong. Here's all the ways you've acted badly. But he just names the places, just where it happened, in order to elicit, maybe, in the memory of it, the ability for the Israelites themselves to put themselves back into that place, to feel inwardly what had happened there, right? Instead of being talked down to, he invites them to be back in those places by naming them each and every time. And you can feel in the way he delivers, I'm just going to do that because there you go. In the way he delivers his criticism, that he's doing it very carefully. He's very careful, and he's very gentle in the words that he chooses in that long list. He criticizes, for sure, like this is really clear, it's not ambiguous, but he does so in a way that maintains the dignity of the people he's talking to. He doesn't look to humiliate them. It's very carefully crafted, the way this passage is written. And it works because they already love him. They know that he's been a champion to them, to their cause, that he's defended them. Even when God wanted to wipe them out time and time again, he stood up on their behalf. He has not only gained their trust over those 40 years, but he had make it so that they know the deep love that he has for them. And so they trust him. See, if somebody gives feedback or criticism to you, but you know that they embody and ooze this love for you, then you can trust what is being shared in a different kind of way. They knew he loved them. And they knew, therefore, that this criticism that was coming at them was grounded in that place of deep love for them. So what the rabbis are commenting on reading this passage is, or understanding from this passage, that when we give criticism, when we give critical feedback, we need to do that with, in our heart, great sensitivity for the feeling of the other. Like, it's important just to know where the person is at in the moment that you step into this criticism. Maybe they had a hard day. Maybe they had a really horrendous day. Maybe that's not the good time for that. You have to be extremely sensitive to where is the person at in this moment. And Moses feels that the time is appropriate for him to do that. And he does that with showing great respect for the person. I criticize you, but I respect you at the same time. That's hard to do. I mean, giving feedback is not a science. It really is an art, right? So he's very attuned to the moment. He's very attuned to who is there. And he holds his people with great respect. They've traversed through a lot. They've gone through a lot. And yes, they failed many times along the way. And still, he loves them and respects who they are for having survived all this time. So his feedback is constructive and not destructive. So often we get into those places in our life where we just lash out. Somebody did something we don't appreciate, and we're going to say something that is hurtful and in fact can be destructive to your relationship with them, to their own sense of self-esteem, right? How do we give and say the same things, but in a way that builds someone instead of taking them down, builds them up? And another comment that I found was that the rabbis see in the way he's delivering his rebuke, his reproof, according to Rashi, shared from a deep sense of humility. Like Moses also knows his own failure. He knows that he is not, and our tradition makes sure of that, he's not a Messiah that walks on water. He had his own moments of doubts. He failed. The reason why he's not allowed to walk into the promised land is because he hit the rock instead of talk to the rock as God had told him, where he lost his temper, he lost his center, he lost his ground, he became angry. He became collapsed into his ego. And so he knows very humbly, he knows his own failures as he points out the others, but he doesn't lose track of that. He doesn't set himself above everyone, saying like, I'm an angel and you're not, kind of thing. Which brings me to this retreats that have been going on, 4 retreats over the last year. We just ended earlier this month. It was an amazing group of people who came together to really work on self-growth and development in the context of a group, which is oftentimes challenging. And one of the retreats, the theme was truth-telling. And we worked together on how do you give feedback? How do you share with someone, oftentimes, your own projections onto them, right? Because a lot of what we see in others is the things we don't want to look at in ourselves. And so I can't really, it's hard to do something like that. This was the tail end of a year where we got to know each other, work with each other, went into the trenches of personal growth and development together. And we got to a place where we really not just appreciated each other, but really had a deep love for each other. And it's only when you have that between yourself and others that you can sit in front of them and say, okay, here's my projections onto you, here's how I perceive you, right? And give that kind of feedback. By the way, we also worked on not just criticism, but also what we started to call golden shadows. All the great things that we see about, in others, right? We don't recognize often that, how we think of somebody else to be wonderful and loving and compassionate. We bestow them, we shower them with all the great goodness of the world, right? That's called golden shadows. Like we also deny that in ourselves. We always put it like others are good, others are compassionate, or you are so wonderful, i.e. I'm not. I'm putting it onto you because I can see it in you, but I can turn the mirror around. So we worked on that as well. Every compliment we had for each other, we were like, okay, stop. Why are you denying that in yourself, or are you? It's very, very transformative exercise. But when we did give that, here are my projections onto you, here's my actually dark shadows onto you, we had a catchphrase, like we were given a phrase to start our list of things. And the phrase was, in my loving interest of furthering and growing our relationship together, I want to share with you this. And everyone started this way, from this place. In the loving interest that I have in furthering and growing, evolving our relationship together, let me share with you what's up for me and what's up between us, right? But the fact that we started with that set the whole conversation from a different place altogether, right? Because we did it from that place of love, that place of really wanting to connect, right? That place of really wanting to be one with that other person, that place where we wanted to improve, like we wanted to get rid of that stuff that was cluttering our ability to be together. Because I have all these stories about you, and I don't want to mar our relationship because of those stories. Can we talk about those stories in the interest of furthering and growing lovingly our relationship? And I feel that a lot of what Moses is doing, he doesn't say those words the way we did it at the retreats, but he starts from there. You can feel that he's starting from there. His rebuke, if Rashi is correct, of his listing all of those places where the Israelites missed the mark, is not to take them down, is to build them up. They're about to enter into the promised land without him. He wants to make them see how to improve upon themselves so that they can be successful in the march forward. That's why he's doing that, so that they can be successful in the march forward as they enter the promised land. He rebukes them, I would say, for the greatest good of all. For the greatest good of all. He wants to strengthen the resolve of his people in doing that. Can you imagine if we entered into any moment of giving feedback with the intention not only to strengthen our relationship with the other person, but with the intention to to strengthen them, to make them more resilient, right? To make them, to show them the way that in the way we hold them or the way we feel that they behave, they are actually hindering themselves. They're actually sometimes selling themselves short, sometimes sabotaging themselves. So we come to this with a sense of, I want you to become the best person you can be. And I want to be in this loving relationship with you that doesn't have all this baggage in between us. Ultimately, it is to acknowledge with that kind of respect and that kind of love and that kind of compassion, to acknowledge the sacred being that we all are. That when we stand in confrontation, and I know most of us are very afraid of confrontation because we've been hurt and because we don't want to hurt others. And that's totally understandable. And I'm not really talking about confrontation. And if I am, I'm talking about a loving confrontation, an uplifting confrontation. And again, it's in the service of knowing the sacred in the other person and the sacred within ourselves. And the sacredness of this we space that we create together. So I don't know if Moses intended to do that. Rashi says he did, so we have to go with Rashi, because he is Rashi.